Jedrick Wills failed at making the transition from right tackle to left tackle, but the Browns seem open to maybe trying that again. How difficult is it? We talked to Lance Reisland next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road, joined per usual on a Tuesday by Lance Reisland. We got plenty to get to, including the Lance's top corners in this year's draft. We're going to talk a little bit about guys that we would say no to in the first round. And most importantly, perhaps, we know that the Jedrick Wills experiment failed here in Cleveland. But the Browns may be in line to draft another offensive tackle that has to make that change. And I want to pick Lance's brain a little bit on how difficult that is. That is where we start the show. And Lance, listen, I don't know how often this was something that came up for you specifically at the high school level when you coached. Because at that level, you're always kids are still trying to figure out like where they are, what position they should play, and they're kind of banking on you as the coach to tell them, we think you're this, we think you're that. But when you've played it for a certain amount of time in high school and then in college, and then you get to the pros, and not only are you trying to adjust to the speed of the game and the NFL level, you're also trying to make that switch. I subscribe to the idea that it's not for everyone, that it's not just this flawless, seamless thing. But I thought it was interesting that Andrew Berry made some comments at the annual meetings last week about how, you're seeing other players. Penei Sewell is now going to make that jump. Tristan Wirfs, who came out in the same class as Jedrick Wills, made that jump from right tackle to left tackle. And so it just is kind of player to player. It can be so different. But I want to pick your brain a little bit on how difficult of a thing that actually is for a player to try to transition from one side to the other, understanding everything is kind of backwards.
Well, the funny thing is my dad, when he first started coaching back in the 60s and 70s, and we even did this a couple of years when we had really little linemen and some big guys, we used to flip sides. We had a strong side and a fast side, and that was used in college. That's been used for years, and teams still do that occasionally, especially if they're gap teams. Now, there's a couple things that for this tackle issue that I always tell people. First of all, the big thing is blocking the premier edge rushers in the NFL, the Myles Garrett types. Right, the ability, power to speed, speed to power. Usually, besides T.J. Watt, those guys are over on that left tackle. Most quarterbacks are right-handed. That's the blind spot. So that's what everybody talks about. Now, when Andrew Berry says these guys can do this, when you talk about Sewell and you talk about Wirfs, he's talking about a body type and an athletic type. Now, some guys, once again, it's just like when you watch any sport, some guys it doesn't carry over, but the footwork, that's the key footwork. That ability to drive and when you're kicking back. So when you see those tackles in the NFL kicking back and try to ride those defensive end around the corner, obviously from right to left, if you're a right tackle, you're pushing hard with that left foot to get back. And on the other side, obviously left tackle, you're pushing hard with the right. Now, in gap schemes, zone schemes, you double to the right, double to the left. Really, it comes down to, are you able to pass protect and are you able to kick at that left? Because the run game, like I said, you step with near foot. If it's a run game, you step with right and left. That ability to kick back is kind of the key for me when I watch these tackles do it. The run game is nothing. The quick game is nothing because they're going to jump set and get their hands on that defensive tackle. It's those 5 and 7 and 9-step drops that in the NFL where you have to protect that quarterback in the pocket. And can you get back fast enough? Some guys do it better than others. But that when I agree with Andrew Berry on this one, I think the guys they're looking for, not everybody can do it, but the guys they evaluate have great feet. If you think about Iowa, the tight end types, when they get to Iowa, Iowa doesn't get the Alabama, Ohio State kid. What they get is they get the 6'7", 240-pound tight end who they just get in the weight room and eat, and then all of a sudden he's 6'7", 320, but still has tight end feet. Those are the kind of guys Andrew Berry's talking about.
Interesting. And so I guess as we think about this draft class, who are the guys that you would be comfortable with the Browns taking? That whether it's a body type, actually, let's start there. What are you looking for in certain players as it pertains to this class to give you an indicator that I think this guy can make the switch? So maybe less names in this for this question and more so just like, what are you looking for in a player? And then we can sort of apply that to this draft class and come up with the guys that you think actually can make that switch.
Well, it's, if you look at a guy that kind of plays that left tackle in the NFL, when you think about linemen, I'm a little bit older, and when I was growing up, you always thought about these big, heavy guys. That's not what these guys are now. When you go down to Browns practice, and you're with me there all the time, Spencer, some of these offensive linemen do not look like offensive linemen. They look like big tight ends, and they're 310 pounds. So it's that physical, athletic build, but more than anything else, it's light feet. Are you able to move your feet in a small area laterally and vertically and horizontally, et cetera? But it's light on your feet. So if you think about some linemen they lumber a little bit inside. If you look at guards like Ilia Vega, he lumbers a little bit. He moves well, but he's lumbering because he's so big. So these guys that have super light feet, the movement, the fluidity looks effortless. They're 6'7". They might be 310 pounds. They can add a little bit of strength as they get, these are kids. So when they become grown men, they can add some of that mass to them. Now they're doing it for a living so they can eat right, things like that. So for me, it all comes down to feet, the ability to move your feet quickly, be light on your feet, and be able to kind of match that light, those light feet with strong hands, individual punches, things like that. So, the light feet with the technique, I guess, would be a way to look at it.
And so who in this draft class, maybe specifically guys that play right tackle, because I'm sure you're not worried about like a Monroe Freeling being a tackle at the NFL level, who in this class stands out from that tackle group as somebody that you think, if they were asked to make that switch, if they were drafted and then told, hey, yeah, you've played a lot of right tackle, but we're going to move you to left tackle, you think could pull that off?
Well, Spencer Fano's the guy I really like. I think he's got, people talk about him going down inside. Obviously, the arm length. And for me, some of those things that people talk about, like Tim Bielek talks about, I do a draft pod with him. He talks about tight ends and their ability to run. And it doesn't mean success, but it kind of leads to stuff. And like having short arms as a tackle doesn't mean as much if you're an athlete. And, people have talked about Fano, not having long arms or things like that. He's a really good athlete. So he kind of fits that mold. Where he's 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". He's lean. He's got the ability. He's got a great when you watch his footwork, if he's stepping to the right on zone to him or stepping to the left because zone's going away from him, gap schemes, getting to the second level. He does all that really well. So you'd assume his footwork, again, it's really the ability. Are you light on your feet, and can you switch which foot is going to be the dominant foot when you're kicking back? Because you can do everything else pretty seamlessly. It's that ability to kick back and so Fano's the first guy. When you talk about like Blake Miller from Strongsville, actually, obviously played at Clemson. He's another guy, light on his feet, pretty good in pass protection, kicks back very, very well, predominantly played right tackle at Clemson. You got guys like Isaiah World out of Oregon, doesn't run block very well, but really good on his feet, left and right tackle, athletic. So for me, once again, sometimes, everybody has their own thoughts, and it's usually not wrong. It's different. And for me, I'm with Andrew Berry on this one. I like guys who that should be seamless. Now, like everything else, we all make mistakes, and you think that would be seamless. But like you said, Spencer, sometimes it's just not for guys. Sometimes they just get over there, and it just – even some guys that, don't move very well, they, kick them down to guard. Some guys struggle from right to left guard, even though it's really simple in there in terms of you're not kick stepping ever. So it is individually based, but I would say Fano is the type of body type that's 6'7", lean, doesn't look like he's 300 pounds, but is. Those are the guys who have a chance to do it.
Yeah, I like that you bring up Fano. He's somebody that's been on my mind a lot lately for the Browns because of his versatility. And obviously, we know the Browns and building this offensive line this offseason have made that a priority. They've added a lot of guys who can play anywhere across the offensive line. I think that certainly applies to Fano. And we saw at his combine just the athleticism on full display. So I like that you used him as your main example there. We'll come back to maybe some offensive linemen will come back up when we get to some players that the Browns shouldn't maybe draft in the first round. But when we get back, Lance, I know you're an offensive guy by trade, but you did scout these corners in this year's draft class. We're going to talk about some of the top ones that the Browns could consider coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. This episode is sponsored by Betterhelp. Financial stress is something a lot of people are carrying right now, and it's not just about numbers. It can affect your sleep, your relationships, and your overall mental health in ways that build up over time. And the reality is, struggling with money doesn't mean you've failed. Sometimes it just means you haven't had the right kind of support. It's something I've thought about how easy it is to put pressure on yourself financially without really talking about it. The stress that comes with trying to figure out everything on your own, the expectations you feel to have everything together financially, and how that pressure can spill into other areas of your life. Therapy isn't about financial advice. It's about working through the stressing and anxiety and the emotions, frankly, that come with it. With over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 6 million people served, BetterHelp makes it easier to get matched and start focusing on what you need. When life feels overwhelming, therapy can help. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's betterhelp.com/lockedon. Conversation continues here with Lance Reisland for his weekly visit on the pod. And we are going to go to the defensive side of the ball, talk about some corners that Lance really likes in this class and guys that could be in play for the Browns, which I think corner is a sneakier need for the Browns than people maybe realize. Real quick, though, I do want to remind you all about the Everydayer Club, your chance to get Locked On Browns totally ad-free on the audio side, wherever you get your podcasts. Just head to lockedonbrowns.supercast.com, which is in the show notes, to sign up and learn more. It's just $5 a month. You also get access to a members-only Discord channel where you can interact with me, other hosts from around the network, and talk some smack across the rest of the AFC North if you so choose as well. Again, lockedonbrowns.supercast.com to sign up. So, Lance, I'll start by asking you as we turn our attention to the defensive side of the ball and obviously the cornerback group. And I want to get a sense of, there's probably some varying opinions, and I've seen some recently on who the number one corner is. I know Mansour Delane has kind of been the go-to guy, but I've seen Jermod McCoy rising up boards out of Tennessee. I've seen Avion Terrell be mentioned. Who is maybe the guy that you think is the best corner in this class? We'll start there, and then we'll kind of work our way through.
Well, I have Mansour Delane. I have him as my top guy.
Okay.
That hasn't changed. I like Jared McCoy. I think he's outstanding. I think Avion Terrell is the best fit for the Browns because of his ability. I think he's the best. I think he's the stickiest corner in the draft. And the Browns are unique in what they do. They play a lot of man coverage now with Rutenberg. You're going to get a lot of more. You're going to get a little bit more shell. They're going to play a little bit more zone, but they're predominantly going to still be in one high hat. It's just how they get there. It'll be a little bit of window dressing just so they can bring different simulated blitzes, but it'll be man coverage. And I think Terrell is, for me, is the combined length with fluid hips, recovery speed, etc., ball skills, all those words we use. I think Avion Terrell is the best fit for this Browns defense, this man-based defense.
So from there, who is maybe the next in line for you, and maybe give us your top 5 corners in totality here?
Well, if you start with that, so I have Delane as my number 1. I have Chris Johnson out of San Diego State, number 2. I really like him. I love his ability to change direction.
That's definitely a little off the. That's not off the wall, but a little bit different than what I think I've seen from others. Certainly, other people for sure.
Sure, yeah. And corner's a really tough one, and of all the things that they get kind of hammered for, and Barry gets hammered for, they do a nice job of kind of identifying the corners they want. I love Chris Johnson. I love his competitive spirit, length, ball skills. Really, again, another that guy that's really sticky. I have Colton Hood from Tennessee, the other corner I love, is my number 4. Avion Terrell is my number 5, and then I have Jeremiah McCoy from Tennessee. Now, McCoy is really shotting up the boards. What I try to do is stick to my guns even before this is all film-based. So, some guys run a little bit better and they look great and stuff, but it's all film-based. So I love those top 5 guys. Obviously, McCoy and Terrell and Delane are outstanding in man coverage. But I'm going to give you a guy that is he'll get passed over no matter what everybody is saying, because the one thing I learned about the NFL, measurements mean a lot to some of these GMs. Andrew Berry, D'Angelo Pons from Indiana is an absolute dog and will compete with everybody. He's got that 43-inch vert. So when I watch the film and go, yeah, he's undersized. Kid can jump. He's great at the catch point. D'Angelo Pons fits this Browns defense. Now, I worry a little bit about his size, not because he won't throw his hat in there, because in this Browns defense, you have some run support in D&C gap as a corner.
I've talked about Pons with you before off this pod. I love him. And what it is for me, Lance, with him is, yes, the measurables are probably concerning to NFL teams, rightfully so. They always look at those things. But even on tape, and as I was watching him throughout that run of the college football championship, like, he doesn't play like his size. There's just like there's a want to, there's a desire. I think back to the Big Ten championship game and all the stories that they kept telling about how him and Jeremiah Smith went to the same the same high school, and he was matched up against Jeremiah Smith. And he actually did a pretty good job against Jeremiah Smith, who's considered one of the best players in college football in that Big Ten championship game, kind of taking him out of the equation in certain instances and playing tough defense on him. Like, some of that stuff to me speaks more volumes than anything that went down at the combine in terms of his measurables and things like that. So I love that about Pons. I think he plays bigger than what his size actually says.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And then you take into account, if you look at like him and Jacob Rodriguez, those are two guys, I didn't care what their numbers were. And people say, what do you mean? I didn't care what their measurements. Now, they both jumped real well and ran real well. They had good combines, pro days, etc. I didn't care if they had bad. I didn't care. In fact, if you're a Browns fan and you see the film, it's like Harold Fanning Jr. You want them to run bad. You want them to jump bad because then people will back off. Watch the film on Harold Fanning. Watch the film on Rodriguez. Watch the film on Pons. These guys are absolutely dynamic in what they do. There's guys who are longer, like, I love a kid, Thaddeus Dixon out of North Carolina. Igman Nosen from OSU is 6'2". Traden Stukes from Arizona is long. They have all the measurables. But Pons is the guy, I have him a little bit lower on my list than I think I probably should as I look at myself, just because everything you've said. He's a competitive guy who is much bigger than his measurables.
So that's maybe the guys at the top of the board. Who are some guys that you have your eyes on in terms of maybe being later on options that still bring some value to the Browns? Guys that might not be like your day one or even early day two picks, but guys that maybe later on in the draft you think the Browns could snag and get some value out of.
Well, I'll start right there. Traden Stukes is a guy out of Arizona, really, really long. What I like about him is, again, you have to be really, really fluid in your hips. You have to be able to change direction. If you do get beat, you need to be able to flip those hips, and you need to be able to cover ground. Stukes is a guy that does that for me. I love his ability to kind of cover ground, and then again at the catch point, these guys' ball skills. This is a really deep cornerback class. So when you watch film, it's really hard to decide, like my 1 through my 20th. I mean, there's not a huge difference in these guys. I think Delane is a guy who stands out because of where he played and who he goes against, but he's an outstanding guy. A guy that I really, really like is called Brandon Sissy out of South Carolina. He may be the fastest straight line guy in the at the cornerback position. Ability to cover ground. He does get sometimes handsy at the top of routes. Sometimes he's not super fluid in everything he's doing, but he's a guy who could run, cover ground, super aggressive, plays man coverage, zone, do a really nice job of South Carolina with some of the schemes they run. I really like their film on both sides of the ball, but really like Sissy. And like I said, he might be the fastest guy in this at the cornerback position, especially football fast. He's outstanding.
Do you agree that corner is maybe more of an underrated need for the Browns coming into this draft? And specific to the slot position, is there a guy that you think would fit that spot maybe best, knowing that that's maybe the one hole the Browns have in terms of their starting lineup that they're maybe looking to fill coming up here later this month?
Well, it's interesting because it's that, if you look at the cornerback, I think you're spot on with it's a need, right? Especially in this pressure, you got to have guys that can cover man. You can hide corners a little bit more in zone coverage. You can put it, especially at the NFL level. There's no bad corners in the NFL. There's just better corners. But the ones who are at the bottom are still really good. So you can hide those guys in zone a little bit. You can give safety help in zone a little bit. But the Browns are going to be in man. If you talk about like the man coverage and then the nickel back and then all the things that Browns are going to do, for me, I would say Avion Terrell again. I think he's a guy run support, could play in the nickel. A guy that's interesting. We just talked about him, but depending on what they want to do with the nickel, is it a 12 personnel nickel or is it 11 personnel nickel? Because 11 personnel nickel, the best nickel, probably in my opinion, will be Pons. Again, because of his aggressiveness and ability, his suddenness in the slot. Could struggle a little bit with big bodies and 12 personnel, though, so it depends on what they want to do there.
That is the lowdown on the cornerback class, courtesy of Lance Reisland. I think you makes a lot of valid points, Lance. I really like Avion Terrell. I've mocked him a couple times to the Browns. And I actually think next week we should probably get into staying in the secondary, the safety class and guys that they could be exploring there. We know there's a few that they've talked to or at least had in on visits. And that's another spot that I think is kind of a sneaky need for the Browns. So we'll get into that coming up next week. But definitely one of those positions that if the Browns were to take it early, I would not be surprised, and Browns fans certainly shouldn't be surprised either. When we come, we're not done yet. The conversation rolls on. And the next thing I want to talk about with Lance, we've talked so much about guys that we would like for the Browns in certain spots and that we're open to or whatever. I want to know if Lance has anybody that he's basically like, no, do not want him. Don't take him at 6. Don't take him at 24. We'll talk about some of those guys in the first round coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Final segment here on the show and Lance Reisland's visit this week, and we're just 2 weeks out now from the NFL draft, where the Browns will obviously let us know if our mock drafts were close, if they were way off, if our predictions were close, if our predictions are way off. Maybe Jeremiah Love will be the pick, as Lance has been touting here for the last week or so, and we've all been talking about. We'll see. But, Lance, it's funny because I think the Jeremiah Love conversation is actually a good one to maybe open up this conversation, because there are a lot of people who I think hear that convo and are very close-minded to it, because they're like, why would I take a running back when that's one of the things the Browns actually have figured out at this point? And I can understand that thought process, but I'm somebody who with Jeremiah Love, I'm probably open to it because of the talent that he is, but I do understand the thought process of like, it's not the biggest need, so why are you even doing that in the first place? And so I don't know that that's what the Browns are going to do if he's there, but I am open to it. But for some people, I think Jeremiah Love probably is like a no thank you, do not do it. I'd be pretty upset. I know actually I on 92.3 The Fan, I had Josh Edwards of CBS Sports on this past weekend, and he flat out said Jeremiah Love would be one of the choices that he would hate for the Browns if they actually took him there. So we've all kind of got different players that we're kind of out on, and you don't have to go through all of them at once, but maybe we'll go through a couple different ones here if there are any, but who's the first player that comes to mind in terms of like first round guys that you're just kind of like, I don't really think they should take him at 6 or at 24, frankly, because you just don't think he fits what the Browns are trying to build?
This is a tough one for me because I usually try to say
I was going to say, I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, Lance, because I know that you're usually pretty like open to a lot of guys.
Yeah.
But I also know you think about like fit, and it's probably going to come more from a standpoint of that than like, I really don't like this guy. But who are the guys that you just don't give us one to start us off that you maybe think just isn't the right fit for what the Browns are doing?
Well, this one I have to be honest about. This is the one that bothers me a ton, and people have talked about. It's Caden Proctor, the kid out of Alabama.
Yeah.
Now, when you watch him, he's a mountain, but he's not the tackle I like. I like tackles that have to eat and kind of keep their weight up. I don't like guys who are that big and that heavy. That's hard on the joints. We've seen with Juwan Jones. That's really, really hard. There's an effort there thing with me too. Whether that's realistic or not, I don't know, because he's so big and so talented. I mean, the talent is not what I'm talking about with this kid, but this is a kid that if you told me at the end of 2 years from now he's all pro, I would have no question about it. But if you also told me he's not playing very well and he wasn't worth the pick, I wouldn't be shocked by that either. The guys who don't maximize their effort because of their skill set worry me at that level, because everybody gets paid to be really good at that level. So that's without question. Caden Proctor is the guy that I would not draft if I was anybody.
I think that's a really good one. And honestly, referencing again on 92 The Fan, I had a chance to talk to Mike Rodak, who covers Alabama, and he mentioned that with Proctor, it's just been like inconsistent. And there just hasn't been like he has all the traits that you look for, but it's just been inconsistent play. And I think that has popped up on tape when I've watched him. And that's concerning to me. Like when I hear that, I think I do have flashbacks of Jedrick Wills. I don't mean to apply that to every Alabama tackle, obviously, but it does make me have some flashbacks to Jedrick Wills where it's like, is it going to be all the time with him? Is it going to be consistent with him? And if the answer to that is, I don't know, I don't think I can take him. I like that answer a lot. That's definitely one that's on my list. I'm going to start with just, and this is pretty much just a first round thing for me, but I can't take Ty Simpson in the first round. I can't do it. Maybe the Browns get to a point where they feel he's their gotta have it franchise quarterback, and I'm the person who always says, if you think you have that guy on the board, then you got to take him, because it doesn't matter about the offensive line. You'll figure it out later. Look what the Patriots just did with Drake May, right? But I just don't think he is that guy, and I don't want to see them pull the trigger on him in the first round. Once you get out of the first round, all bets are off, and I'm like, okay, I could understand it. But for me, I can't take Ty Simpson in the first round.
Yeah, the 15 starts, once again, I go back to Bill Parcells, and I kind of did some research on that because it's always like, oh, you need this. But, Bill Parcells was like a 3-year starter, 30 starts, 23 wins. There's a ton of things that go on there, and there's a certain callus that you get both mentally and physically when you start games, ups and downs as a quarterback. I don't care what level you play at, you're going to have ups and downs. You kind of build up a callus, and you understand the game better, and you see more coverages and fronts and blitzes. Not that Ty Simpson can't do it. But I don't think he can do it right away. And that 15 starts for me. That's. Yeah. I told you that for a month now. That one is a no-go for me. The next one I got for you, I got a good one for you. Even though I think he's going to be outstanding, you worry again in today's NFL. Caden McDonald, the defensive tackle, who I have number 1 on my board. However, it depends on what you're looking for. I think he's got all the physical tools, but he's more of a run stopper. So again, if you're a team that has, a great scheme and you play in line of scrimmage, he's in, but he's not going to be a guy who wows you. So I would stay away from him.
Well, now the foot situation with him is also very fascinating, and we don't know what that's going to sort of mean. He was kind of a consensus first round pick for a while, and now I don't know that that's going to even be the case with him. So I'm with you. That's another good answer. My other one, and this is. I guess I don't know. I guess I'm really honing in on these offensive linemen, but I think I've told you this before, Lance. I just don't think Francis Maui-Noah should be the pick at 6. I just don't. And some of this is what we talked about earlier, where you said like I subscribe to the idea that the guys can make the switch. It's not as difficult as it seems. But I'm gonna tell you, Lance, like with everything that we've talked about with Maui-Noah, yes, the physical traits are there. He's been really strong, really steady throughout his tape. That shows up, all those things. There's also a lot of talk about he's played only right tackle. Can he make that switch? And maybe he can. But Lance, there's also been a lot of talk about how he might have to be a guard at some point. And if there's all these things that I'm asking myself along the way, well, he might have to do this. He might work at left tackle. He might do this. He might do that. It's just too many mights and too many maybes for me to pull the trigger on a guy that's supposed to be your franchise left tackle at 6. I just can't do it. So, like, if he somehow fell to 24, fine. I'm more open to it. But in terms of, like, the guys that are near the top of the board that could be options for Cleveland, if they really do want to go tackle early like that, I think Maui-Noah was the one guy on the offense at the tackle spot who I'm kind of like, I'm not feeling it at 6. It just feels a little too rich for a lot of maybes.
Well, he's one of those. It's an interesting guy. So there's a tackle that's kind of like a tackle that's going to move down into guard. He's not a super athlete. He's a good athlete. Yeah. But when you talk about like Freeling, you talk about Fano, you're talking about basketball type athletes, right? And it's those movement skills as a basketball player. I don't know if Maui-Noah has that, but I do think that Maui-Noah can be all pro guard. But that's not what the Browns need or what the Browns are looking for. However, if you have, this goes back to my Jeremiah Love, Spence. If you have him as, let's say, everybody's different, but let's say you have him as your top guard on the board, and he's 3 on your board overall, and he's there, then you take him because he's a guy that you think can change the narrative of a game. So once again, it's interesting where these guys are at, but I'm with you. I'm not taking Maui-Noah unless I have him where I think he's one of the game changers. For me, I have 6. He's not one of them, but maybe if you do, only bad plan is no plan. If you do, then take him because you stack good players. That's how you win.
Anybody else, Lance, or was that the most? Was that your exhaustive list? Because I know you're pretty high on most guys.
Well, it's funny. The Ty Simpson one was interesting because I didn't think you were going to go with that, but I couldn't agree with you more. So I would say this instead. Let's look at it this way: the Ty Simpson one starts absolutely. Let's say any offense or defensive lineman that, away from the measurements, away from, how long your arms are and you're all this 10-yard split, any guy that just doesn't have nasty, this is my livelihood 1-2. Those are the guys you can't draft early because those are the guys, they might pan out, but they might not. And Jedrick Wills is a great example of that. And once again, I don't criticize things I can't do. And being a left tackle in the NFL, is definitely one of them. But when you watch Jedrick Wills, and you've been there with me, he can do all of it. He can do it all. He's a super, super talented guy that deserved to be picked where he was. He just doesn't have the want to. So that would be, instead of, so I'm not calling anybody out that I love. I will say, just if you don't have want to, you can't play on that offensive defensive line in the NFL. Those guys are killers.
I think you're right about that. Lance, always a pleasure. He joins us weekly here on the Locked On Browns podcast. And if you liked his visit, if you like what you heard, if you feel like you learned something, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. And at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, plus wherever you get your podcasts. Also, don't forget about the Everydayer Club, your chance to get the show audio or ad-free. Audio-free would not be how you want to listen to any podcast. On the audio side of things, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast, that's available to you. Just go to lockedonbrowns.supercast.com to sign up and learn more. You can also keep it local. Check out my friends at Locked On Cavs and Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an Everydayer with the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you next time on the podcast. See you then.